Hey everybody, welcome to the next episode of Smashified. This is the first Smashified that we've done since the rebrand to Curiomatic, and also the first Smashified that we've done since the launch of Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. So, hope you guys are looking forward to what we've got in store. I am Artsy Omni, and today I am joined by Andrew.
Hey guys.
And also Chris.
Hey everybody.
So, Andrew, this is something that you've been working on for the past year or so. This is like your baby, your child.
No, it's like 4 years.
Yeah, I think the first image was about 3 years ago.
The first progress shot that you did.
Right.
Well, so we've been pretty much you're the one who's been working on 99% of this. So probably concede to whatever your knowledge is on the project.
Yeah, so I guess it wasn't every day for 3 years.
Right.
Sometimes we stopped for 6 or 7 months before picking back up.
Right. Because I think you started the project in the middle of other characters that were already in progress that have since come out. So I would imagine this was something that, it's been on the Trello board for a long time.
Some characters like this get put on the back burner, but it's good to see that they finally get pushed to front.
Toriyama's specific style when it comes to how he draws animated characters is very distinct, and I think it's a fun challenge to try to bring that into the third dimension. So looking at these references, there's a lot of variance between them, and I'm sure that was a big challenge for Andrew when you were making this.
We also had official artwork from Square Enix where they've already tried to translate Akira Toriyama's art style into 3D.
Arc System Works Dragon Ball Fighters and Dream Factory's Toe Ball was also developed with Akira Toriyama,
which also helped a lot.
Another great reference was that Rodriguez Prelier, and he happens to love Dragon Ball Z, and so he's made tons and tons and tons of Dragon Ball Z models and statues.
How old is Crono?
Canonically, he's 17.
Man,
but he's like a tiny, he's like a tiny Arnold Schwarzenegger or something, So how tall is he? He must be short too. So he's not
pretty short. It varies. Looking at all of these different references, these drawings of Chrono, it actually changes a lot, his general body proportions, which was one of the challenges. Speaking of challenges, we can probably talk about some of the other big, problem areas that we had to address, these different dilemmas that are often faced when you're translate a character from 2D to 3D, and one of those was the hair. It was a big deal, and boy did we have a lot of iterations for that hair.
Well, it's not really something that you can just figure out. We're looking at how would Toriyama draw it even today as opposed to before, and how would Square Enix, it's like a chain of thought, how would Square Enix translate that to 3D, and then also how would Sakurai translate that into a Smash Bros style, because you're going through 3 different filters there, and we're trying to figure that out separately, so just add an extra layer.
Well, so taking all of that into account, Andrew, you're the one who started work on this, and so when you started creating a base model, what was your thought process, and what were you trying to capture with the blockout?
So I'm looking at these images of your old blockout. Do you always block out your characters like actual blocks like that?
The first thing I do is just get the proportions where I want them to be. I just try to stay as flexible across the entire model for as long as possible.
For the blockout, we referenced some orthographic turnaround sheets of Goku since his proportions are kind of similar. But Chrono does have a little bit less muscle mass and a slightly smaller frame than Goku, which we had to take into account.
I'm noticing that our final render has a very similar pose to some of that official artwork.
We went through a lot of different iterations, different kinds of poses. One was a squatting pose that I remember me not being happy about.
Yeah, because squatting's not really associated with in this case lunging and being real epic.
Yeah, it's a very stable. It's like a samurai kind of stance.
Really difficult, again, what you were just mentioning, a really difficult part of this is the sword. The sword, even in that artwork, is twice the size of him, so...
Yeah.
I feel like that was actually one of your main complaints about this pose, is that the sword takes up too much of the frame.
Yeah, I don't really think you would see a Smash render so much doing that, but I don't know. I feel like poses is kind of something that we could always practice, as with anything, but yeah, the squatting pose definitely wasn't working.
A problem that Marvelous Designer actually brought up was that because for all the Smashifieds, we normally do the pose at the very end of the process, basically. But since now the clothing depends on the pose, now we have to make the pose much earlier than, and we have to finalize it much earlier. That way
Right, because it's an actual simulation, so you have to actually move the model from T-pose into the pose.
Speaking of shape, I'm really interested to hear, Andrew, about what you did to get the clothes to look like, proper and flowing. And did you use Marvelous Designer or what?
I actually learned how to use Marvelous Designer for Chrono.
I did that too for Wine Ghost. Just a little tidbit.
I think that's the only other process that we've actually had Marvelous involved.
I don't know how it's changed, but is it more easy to get down now? Because when I tried to use it, it was like Marvelous Designer, if people don't know, is an application that is to simulate how you put clothes together and stitch. You actually stitch them together. And so when I was looking at it, it was actually like people were using it for making clothes, and it wasn't really being used for anything like this.
Yeah, it was. I think its original purpose is to be used actually in the fashion industry to prototype clothing.
But now it's used in games. It's used in movies.
So you took the model, basically, literally had the clothes kind of sewn to, not to him, but like to around him and to fit that form and to fit that pose, right?
I mean, I sewed the clothes to him in the T-pose formation, and then I made a shape key to him in his final pose position, and then I played that animation from T-pose to final pose in Marvelous Designer, and then the cloth stretched itself and formed accordingly.
So you kind of had to animate him then, right? You didn't just go from key 1 to 2. You had
it was actually just straight interpolation linearly from key 1 to key 2. It was not good. It doesn't look nice. And I'm wondering, Andrew, would you say that the fidelity of the clothing in this particular render is beyond what you would expect from Smash Ultimate, or?
Looking at things like Marth's clothing, like how his pants go down into his boots, I would say that Marvelous Designer is higher fidelity than what the Smash Ultimate renders are.
Yeah, I mean, based on that North render that you're talking about, it kind of just looks like a sculpt, really.
Yeah.
That was my assumption. But again, I mean, this is an opportunity for us to learn different parts of the process, and so even if this might be a little overboard when it comes to Super Smash Brothers, I think it's valuable to be able to try it out. I mean, it's definitely not something that we would use for every character. There's some characters that are just too cartoony for that, and so I guess it's really just a judgment call. One of the questions that we brought up in the process of trying to figure out how to do the clothing was looking at the illustration. He's got this weird kind of green sock-like, I don't even know how to describe it. It's like a sock, but it doesn't seem like it's a sock. Yeah, it goes over the pants and then into the boots. Like tucking your pants into your socks is not something that you usually do.
Do you think that it's just the inside of his pants and he's rolled up the pants?
There is actually one piece of concept art that reveals Chrono's feet without his boots on.
We can actually see that it's like his toes stick out at the end of it, and
so weird.
So it's kind of like would you call it like a leg warmer? No.
I guess so. I mean, that's the closest analog I can think of.
Does anyone in the comments want to leave a comment as to what they think?
Yeah.
Green
Comment what you think these things are. We'd love to know.
For sure.
So why don't we talk about the sword a little bit? I mean, what kind of sword is that? I think a lot of people look at Japanese culture and kind of think it's just a samurai sword. It's just, what it is, but any details?
I would say a lot of people are pretty familiar with this general type of sword. It's in a lot of Japanese media, obviously, being a katana.
To be more specific about the sword, I think this is the steel saber that you can get actually pretty early on in the game. There's one website that has uploaded the concept art for a lot of the weapons in the game, and just based off of the design of the sheath and the sword alone, this one most closely matches the design of Chrono's sword and the rest of his concept art.
How did you go about actually modeling the sort of cloth wrap, like that fabric wrap around the handle?
I sheared a circle, so actually all those wraps connect to itself back on the other side. It's not continuously wrapping up.
Ah, okay. So you're only faking it. And I assume you used maybe like an array modifier to create a bunch of them. Okay, that makes sense. But then the big challenge, again, we touched on this before, was getting these particle hair strands to look good, because this is the first time we've used the actual hair system that Blender has built in to create hair. And I'm assuming you made that decision to do like actual hair particles because of Smash Ultimate?
Well, we went through a lot of versions of it too. It wasn't just like one and done. And were you using the Blender hair technique the entire time?
Yeah, so there were a lot of different directions that we could have taken the hair. Most of the Smash Bros. Renders seem to be using hair cards from their game models. But even still, they are very convincing. Like, if you zoom up really close to them, they almost look like hair particles. There are a few exceptions, though, like Cloud and Pit. Both of their hairs are actually 3D modeled. But ultimately, we decided to use a hair particle system, even though I'm not actually sure if any Smash Bros. Renders actually do that. But it gave us more flexibility for the shape and material shading for the hair. And the way that I set that up in Blender is by using a curve for each of the cones to follow separately. And then so after that, I could just modify the curve for each cone, so it was very easy to adjust and tweak if we needed to do that.
I'd be interested to hear a bit more about materials in general though, because hair was obviously a big item, but you're also looking at someone who's got like a ton of different type of cloth. He's got a belt buckle, he's got leather, he's got, a giant dragon tooth or whatever on his, bag. So there's a lot of different materials to play with there, not to mention the obvious ones of like skin.
So we've been using Substance Painter pretty frequently for a lot of the things that we were working on now, but when you started this process, was this one of the earlier Substance Designer processes that you did?
Yeah, so this was one of the first characters where we began the switch to Substance Painter, and because of that I had to redo the textures a few times actually. For the materials, Dragon Quest XI was one of the large inspirations that we had for Chrono. Even though this is supposed to be a Smash Bros. Style render, we still felt like Dragon Quest XI was a good example of how Square would most likely modernize Chrono Trigger assets if they made them again today.
Also, something that we took into consideration was the difference between the way that they did the renders for Smash Bros. 4 and for Smash Bros. Ultimate. You can see in a lot of places they actually use like pink and blue different tones of light. And Greninja's reflections on his water bubbles, you can see that I think they're using an HDR map of some kind.
Oh yeah, that's true, to inject some color from different angles.
But also you can see on it's not just Greninja, on the boots of Lucina, you can see that there's some purple light coming from the left side over there. It's actually a pretty strong too.
The lighting setup in Smash Ultimate is pretty different. You talked about having that sort of colored accent light in a lot of places, whether that's part of the HDRI or an actual like light source that they put in the scene. But that's definitely another thing that creates a distinction between the two styles.
Also, in addition to the tinted lights, Smash Ultimate renders have a much stronger rim light than Smash 4 renders had. You can see the white light very prevalently along the silhouette of all the characters. This is also a question that we get asked pretty often, I think, is how we do our Smash lighting setup.
Right, yeah, I remember someone talking about that on stream. And the short answer is we don't really have like a locked-in setup that we use for each render. We kind of just
make it up on the fly.
Just come up with it on the fly, improvise. And that's probably not how they actually do it in their own renders. They probably have a pretty consistent lighting setup, but they probably do move the lights around to base it, like based on where the character is posed.
Not every character is going to work in the same lighting, as well.
Yeah.
So it makes sense as an artist, you got to change it up for each of them. But
yeah, we don't want to make it sound like we set it up differently each time because we're incapable of making a template. But
right, we're just too lazy.
You have to set up the lights in a way that is specific for that character to look its best. Like I think, there's an example here where I set up a light directly under Crono's chin, just because it was blending in too much with the neck there.
And there's another example of the main light that he used to light the right side of his body was blowing out the reflection of the sword. So I had to put in planes along the length of the sword to block some of that light, and just that way it got a little bit of catch light along the sliver of the crease in the sword.
Yeah, if you look at the lighting setups on a lot of the characters that we've rendered, it can get pretty crazy. And I can just imagine, like, if you were trying to replicate this kind of lighting setup in real life, you'd have like all of these different stands holding these tiny little lights everywhere.
Yes, but doing it virtually in a digital space is much easier because you can have this
You
light
don't have
behind.
to put the stands anywhere; they just float. I guess one question we could ask Andrew is, what have you learned from doing this 3-year-long process? The silence.
Well, I'd be curious, Andrew, why Chrono for you, man? Why did you stick your neck out so far to say, like, this has to happen? We have to do Chrono. Like, what makes him so important to you personally? Did you play the Chrono Trigger games growing up? Or was
Yeah,
it, like,
I played-
big influence?
I did play Chrono Trigger when I was like 11 or 12. It was weird when I played it because I didn't even know it was a good game. My brother was just buying a bunch of random games, and he said he just picked it up because he thought the name sounded cool. And so for maybe like 2 years, I thought that this was just like an underground game that I found that nobody knew about until I saw it on like the top #1 RPG list on IGN. It's like, whoa, how do they know about that? And then slowly I realized that it's a classic.
Well, I would say one thing that I think we could stand to learn from this process as a team would be that we definitely have a lot of our own individual strengths.
Mm-hmm.
And with a process that's like all solo one person on it, it can become difficult to sort of direct each other, like give each other feedback, because there was a lot of back and forth when we were creating this. When Andrew was working on this, he would show us progress shots and we would shout at him different opinions and basically leave it up to him
We
to
don't
figure
shout
out
at
what
Andrew.
to do with it.
We don't want people to think we shout at Andrew.
Very kindly shouting at each other about what things we should do. But it definitely feels like when we do work together on a process, it goes like so much faster. But I guess that's pretty much it for this process. So hopefully you guys have gleaned some information about our process, our current process as it stands now. And hopefully you found this insightful, enjoyable, and we definitely had a lot of fun and anguish at the same time, getting from the start to the finish. So if you like this video, go ahead and do all of those things that you love to do on YouTube, you know. Hit that subscribe button, smash that bell, break it in half, and make sure you share this with people. I'm sure that people are going to be excited to see that Smashified is coming back. And until next time, I have been Omni, and this was Andrew and Chris. We'll see you guys next time.